Welcome back, everybody, to the California Small Farm Conference. I am very excited that I get to spend the next hour with you talking about bugs. And we are here with Ellie Andrews, who's going to be talking about organic IPM for vegetables. So very much looking forward to this. Appreciate you coming in. And just want to encourage everybody throughout today's workshop to use the functions at the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat if you'd like to say hello, introduce yourself, share resources or insights of your own. And if you have questions specifically for Ellie, I encourage you to use the Q&A feature, and she will make sure to get to those questions later on in the workshop. So with that, I hope you all enjoy today's workshop and learn something new. Enjoy.
Thanks so much, Evan, for the introduction. I appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. My name is Ellie Andrews, and I'm the Specialty Crops Advisor with UC Cooperative Extension based in Sonoma, Marin, and Napa counties. And today I'm really excited to talk to you about organic IPM for insect pests in vegetable systems. Okay, so the learning goals for this workshop are 1, to understand key IPM concepts and strategies, and 2, for a pest of your choice, outline your own IPM plan that you can use on your organic vegetable farm and refine over time. So to do that, I'm going to start with a foundational introduction to IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management. I'm going to go over important concepts and different types of strategies you could consider. And then we'll go into using IPM on small organic vegetable farms in a lot more depth using 2 key pests. So I'm going to choose the 2 insect pests that I've heard the most about the last 2 years working in this position. And I'm going to share some real world examples from farmers in my area, in the North Bay area, shared with permission from them. And then lastly, we're going to get into how to write your own IPM plan. So I'm actually going to put time aside to walk through all of the steps and give you time to brainstorm whatever way makes sense to you. You might want to have a notebook out or start a note on your phone. We'll get to that a little bit later towards the end. So you'll be able to draft or refine a plan for a pest of your choice. So a lot of farmers I work with say, oh, man, I wish I had more time to do this during the year. So I figured this was a great chance to set aside a little bit of time for you. Okay, so to start with, I have to ask this question. So what is a pest? Really big picture, a pest is just an unwanted organism that damages or interferes with plants that we care about. So that could be weeds, vertebrates, invertebrates, nematodes, different types of pathogens, and so on, right? So there's lots of different pests out there. Today, for the sake of time, because we only have so much time, I'm going to focus in on insect pests in this workshop. But just know that pest is a really broad term. Okay, so an important point I feel I have to make here is that no management is bad management. So sometimes every now and then I hear people say, well, I just let nature do its thing. But that's great for insect pests, diseases, invasive species. Ultimately, it's really bad for the environment because it creates pest reservoirs. It's bad for the economic sustainability of your farm. And it's bad for your neighbors, like other farmers and gardeners nearby, but also across your region, since a lot of these pests move around a lot. Cucumber beetle is a great example of that, highly mobile. So I just want to emphasize that we're part of nature and doing nothing can actually do a lot of damage. So it's important to be proactive as much as you can. And so that's why we really need IPM. So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management. The integrated part of this just means that we're combining multiple strategies and not relying on just one strategy alone. And the pest management part is just referring to that we're going to safely and effectively solve pest problems. So you might be familiar with this already, but just in case, the UC IPM website is awesome, and I'd highly recommend looking up UC IPM if you haven't been there already. On this website, they define integrated pest management as a process you can use to solve pest problems while minimizing risks to people and the environment. IPM can be used to manage all kinds of pests anywhere in urban, agricultural, natural areas, and so on. So this is a really big picture approach to pest management. And I want to emphasize that IPM is for everyone, small farmers, large-scale farmers, conventional, organic, regenerative, it doesn't matter. IPM is for anyone, backyard gardeners included. And the reason for that is that it's super flexible. So IPM is this toolbox approach where it fits the needs of your unique situation. So by toolbox approach, I just mean that you can choose a combination of strategies that make sense for you and your context. So we need appropriate and effective tools in your toolbox, so to speak, for your specific pests that you want to deal with. And, it's kind of like you wouldn't really use a hammer to fix every problem, and maybe you actually need a couple different tools for a problem. So IPM just asks what strategies are right for you and your goals, constraints, and opportunities. So the first step to IPM is correct pest identification. You have to know who you're dealing with in order to deal with it effectively. We need to understand the pest biology to know which strategies or tools are going to work best. And then you need to explore lots of different options and consider which ones are really going to work best for you. So an important note here is that IPM does not equal pesticides. So you can use IPM with or without pesticides. It's totally up to you. IPM, I think about it as kind of this big umbrella, as you can see here in this diagram. And under that umbrella, we have lots of different examples of strategies that you can use through IPM. So maybe in some cases, it's floating row cover to exclude pests. Maybe you want to think about which varieties or crop types are resistant or more tolerant for different insect pests. Maybe you want to think about crop rotation and where you put which crops. Promoting natural predators is always a good thing. Soil solarization might work for some cases. Maybe you want to use cultivation, adjusting planting timing, and so on. And pesticides is under this umbrella too, but you don't have to do all of these things. You can just choose which ones make sense for your situation and for your specific pest. So these are just examples of options. You can pick and choose which strategies to use yourself. Okay, so the goals of IPM. IPM focuses on long-term prevention. It minimizes risks to human health, non-target organisms, and the environment. It's an ecologically oriented framework that reduces economic damage from pests. And pesticides are only used when needed, following established guidelines for both safety and efficacy. So I really like this diagram. I'm going to be using it throughout this presentation. IPM is a circular process, it's ongoing. You're refining this over time, you're trying things out. So I really like visualizing IPM as kind of like this big circle or a cycle. And like I mentioned earlier, you want to start with pest ID. So you have to be sure you know who you're dealing with first and foremost before you do anything else. That's going to save you a lot of time and heartache and money just to make sure you know who is causing all this damage you're seeing in the field. And so then you're going to move into prevention and monitoring, keeping an eye on that pest, understanding its behavior and what conditions promote it. And you're going to think through different options for strategies, take action, and then evaluate how it went. Did it work? Did it not? Maybe a little bit, maybe it could be better next time. What could you do differently? So in a lot of like classic IPM courses, some of you might have taken those before, you might see IPM represented in this triangle. So this is just another way to kind of visualize IPM. And again, we're starting at the very base here with identification and understanding your pest. And then you're moving up, into cultural methods. So that might mean things like prevention, modifying the growing conditions to discourage the pest, making the environment less appealing to the pest. You can think about different physical and mechanical strategies like tools, equipment, maybe barriers. And you can consider biological options, so promoting natural predators, maybe exploring some biologically based insecticides and things like that. And then at the very top of this triangle, signifying like, okay, don't do this first. This is like at the very top, we have chemical options. So that includes insecticides, which are just pesticides for insects. And again, you don't necessarily have to do that, but it's at the top of this triangle to show that, okay, you want to think through all of these other things first and try to integrate multiple different strategies. And another thing I want to make sure everyone knows is that organic does not equal no pesticides, all of the time. You can choose not to use pesticides, but there are actually many OMRI-listed insecticides that are available for use in organic systems. So just know that, there are organic options out there. You don't have to use them. And so I want to take a brief aside and just go into this difference between organic and conventional pesticides. So when you hear people say conventional pesticides or synthetic pesticides, they're just talking about compounds that are produced by people through an industrial process that are used as pesticides. Whereas naturally occurring pesticides are derived from compounds produced in nature, like we didn't synthesize them, humans didn't make them. So if you want a little more information on this, I wrote a fact sheet way back in 2018 when I was at Ohio State Extension called Understanding Pesticides in Organic and Conventional Crop Production Systems. This is just a bit of a deeper dive on the subject if you want to understand the difference between these different groups. So the pesticides that are permitted in certified organic production have been approved for use in organic ag according to the USDA. So you can see the Organic Materials Review Institute list or OMRI list if you want to know what those materials are. Most of those are naturally occurring. So many diversified organic vegetable growers in California grow organically. Most of my clientele grow organically. Some are certified, some are not. But regardless, most of them are using organic practices. But do be aware that there are synthetic options too for conventional growers if you're a conventional farmer. And if you want a little more information about reducing off-target risks, I also wrote another fact sheet on protecting pollinators while using pesticides if you choose to go this route. Most organic insecticides are broad spectrum, meaning they're not specific to just the target pest. So you want to make sure you're always following the label instructions for the rate, application timing, personal protective equipment, safety precautions, and so on. There's a ton of educational resources on the UC IPM website on this subject. But you can also see this fact sheet that I wrote too, just to understand like, okay, if you're gonna use pesticides, what are some tips, some practical strategies that you can use to reduce the risk to non-target organisms? And briefly, for more info about pesticides, UC IPM website has this really great active ingredients database where you can look up pretty much any active ingredient and learn about it. The National Pesticide Information Center website is excellent as well and has a lot of information on toxicity, safety, reducing risks. Also, I want to make sure everyone knows that product labels are pretty easy to find online if you ever want to learn about something before you purchase something or you just want a little more information. And then you can also, of course, talk to your suppliers as well for information too. So just really encourage everyone to learn as much as you can before you use anything. Okay, so now that we've covered all that, getting into the IPM for small scale organic vegetables. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but farms tend to have really diverse crops, goals, needs, constraints, and opportunities, right? So like there's no prescription for IPM in these different farms. There's no one size fits all. What works well for you might not really work that well for another farmer. But there are some common needs and trends that I've noticed. And I really firmly believe that examples from other farmers can be super helpful when you're thinking through this. So bearing all that in mind, we're going to focus on the two most economically damaging pests that were reported by organic vegetable farmers in the North Bay area to me over the last 2 years. So these are the two guys that I've heard the most about. So on the left, we have symphylans, and on the right, we have cucumber beetles. Okay, so to start with symphylans, unfortunately, they have a wide variety of annual host plants, which is probably part of why I hear about them a lot. They're elongate white myriapods, so they're centipede-like arthropods. They're sometimes called garden symphylans. So they have these long antennae. They're about sort of translucent white in color, and they're about half an inch long or smaller. I would say normally they're a little bit smaller than half an inch, maybe a third or 3/4. And they have 11 to 12 pairs of legs when they're fully grown. And they cause a ton of damage in vegetable systems. Like I said, wide range of host plants. But the way that, visually you can kind of tell, okay, I think this is probably symphylans is if you see these big patches of stunting in the field where it's kind of like this big circle of death, which is what a couple farmers I work with have called it. I think it's really helpful visual. So like if you see something like this, you can think, okay, maybe it's symphylans. And then in order to check, because they live in the soil underground, you can use a potato bait to check and see if symphylans are there. And it's actually a super straightforward way to monitor for this insect pest. And I go into a ton of detail on that and other strategies in this YouTube video that I recorded because this pest was such a big problem, especially heard a lot about it 2 years ago and even last year too. I went ahead and put everything I could find in this PowerPoint presentation and then put it on my YouTube channel. So you can watch this anytime, but this goes into a lot more depth about the biology of this pest and what to expect from it, and then also a lot of different IPM strategies that you could consider. Okay, so I've listed these strategies here just for the sake of time. I'm going to sort of skim over them. You can definitely watch this and look at the UC IPM website for more information about these strategies if this is a pest that you're concerned about. So just to start at the top here for symphylans, there are various different ways you can prevent them in the first place. You can use that potato bait that I mentioned to monitor them and see, okay, where are the hot spots? Is this really symphylans or maybe it's some other problem? If you use tillage, you can strategically use tillage to disrupt that upper soil layer. I know that's not an option for no-till farmers, but again, these are all just options. You don't have to do all of these things. Some farmers have actually found mild to moderate compaction can help reduce symphylans movement in the soil and reduce damage. Again, you don't want to overdo that one, but a little bit of compaction can actually help. Some farmers have found. Also, a lot of farmers have reported that rotating with potatoes, after you harvest your potatoes and then immediately plant, a lot of farmers have said that the next crop doesn't have as much symphylans damage, which is interesting and an area we need more research on. Another one, symphylans love organic matter, unfortunately. So if you can limit undecomposed residues, that's going to be limiting a food source for them. If you have high organic matter already, especially, you could consider moderating your organic matter inputs. You know, how much compost is enough might be a good question to ask. You could consider using transplants to give your plants a head start. Some farmers use overplanting, so they actually plant more than they think they really need if they think that symphylans are going to cause problems. It might be a good idea to, just wash off farm equipment if you're moving from an area with symphylans to an area that does not have it already to reduce the likelihood of spreading it around your farm. There are various different biological control options, as well as organic insecticides and oil-based products too. So if you want more information, please check out this recording, look at the UCIPM website. There's also a really great ATRA article on this. And I just want to emphasize, I know this is a lot. These are just options and you don't have to do all of these, just choose the strategies that are appropriate for your context and your goals. It's going to look different on different farms. For example, Sonia Parati at Coyote Family Farm needed to plant brassicas in a bed that they knew had symphylans. And she has this awesome Instagram post I'd highly recommend checking out where you can kind of see it, in her own words. And this is shared with permission. So for this situation, their strategies included tilling the soil with a power harrow, adding lime to raise the pH, and then planting. And then they actually compacted the soil a little bit by stepping all over the bed. And this is a small farm, right? So this works on this scale. And then their plants looked really lush and uniform, no stunting. So Sonia said that intentionally creating extra disturbance and compaction is counter to all that we know about good soil management. But in this case, it was the right prescription. So I'm sure many of you are probably thinking that. And she put that into words really nicely. And this is an awesome example of IPM, where we have a farmer integrating multiple different pest management strategies in a way that effectively reduced pest pressure in this specific farm context. Now, should everyone go out and do exactly what she did? No, not necessarily. I'm not saying that. This just illustrates one really great example of how a grower deliberately thought through IPM at her farm, integrated strategies, and got effective pest control. Okay, so now moving into cucumber beetles. Last year was a particularly difficult year, I know, for a lot of farmers with cucumber beetles, especially the spotted cucumber beetle you can see in the left here in our region. So again, these guys also have a wide variety of annual crop hosts. So they like a lot of different plants, which makes it hard to manage. They're about 1/4 inch long. They come in spots or stripes. They're either greenish yellow with black spots, or they've got alternating black and yellow stripes. And I'm going to focus in on the spotted cucumber beetles because they were way more prevalent, at least in our region last year. So they have these long black antennae, a black head, a greenish yellow thorax, and 12 black spots. And they cause a lot of damage. So they skeletonize leaves and flower petals, as you can see here, and they also feed on fruit. So they love like shady, kind of more moist and shady areas. So they'd hang out on the underside of leaves. Sometimes in the field, if you pick up a melon or something, they might be on the underside of the melon where it contacts the soil and it's a little more sheltered from the sun and the heat. So they can cause a ton of damage in a lot of different crops, fruit, flowers, and leaves. And because this is a huge problem, I also made another IPM presentation on cucumber beetles, which is on my YouTube channel, UCCE North Bay Specialty Crops. This one is an hour and 15 minutes because there's just a lot to talk about. So I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of information here. I'm just going to skim the surface, and you can check out this recording for more information. The UC IPM website also has a lot of info too. So this is the Cliff Notes version of that presentation. I'm going to talk through briefly just to give you a sense of like how many different strategies you have in your toolbox. So starting with light tillage to kill the eggs and larvae in the upper soil layer. Again, if you're no-till, obviously just forget about that one. It's no problem. But for those of you who do till, that can actually be a strategy to help control cucumber beetles to some degree. You could consider using floating row covers to exclude them, especially in like high value areas. If you're a larger small farm, maybe that's, only useful in some areas, but especially for smaller scale folks, floating row covers can be great. You can consider transplants, again, to give your plants a bit of a head start. Maybe you want to delay your planting time if that helps you avoid the time that you think cucumber beetles are going to be really prevalent. Mulching can help discourage egg laying in the soil. Drip irrigation can help decrease moisture since, like I mentioned, they really like moist environments or cooler environments. So using drip can help be really fine-tuned with your water management. You can think about crop selection and which varieties or which crop types they prefer. They do have pretty strong preferences for some over others. You definitely want to do scouting and monitoring. So this one's really big. If there's nothing else here, just remember that scouting and monitoring is super important, and you can use yellow sticky traps for that. I go into that in more detail in that recording, but you want to know what's going on out there, and ideally do this early in the season so you can see, as populations start to increase, you can keep an eye on that, and then pair that with thresholds. So, action thresholds where you say, all right, once I see this many beetles on a sticky trap, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 5, then I'm going to do this action. And that's totally up to you what you do next. Also, I'd recommend record keeping, whatever makes sense for you. Different people have different preferences there, but just keeping track of what's going on over the course of a season, but also year to year. Removing plant debris and weeds can really help reduce habitat for this pest. You could consider perimeter trap cropping. I know some farmers do this really effectively. And just be aware, though, if you're going to use trap crops, that you want to have strategies in your toolbox to control those cucumber beetles once they do go to the trap crops that they prefer more than your main crop. Another option, lures and baits. Definitely a good idea to promote natural predators, although I would not rely on natural predators solely, of course, but promoting them can be a great thing. You could use insect vacuums on a small area, and I think that might be a really interesting thing to pair with trap crops potentially. If trap crops on a small area plus insect vacuums, if you want to avoid, using any kind of insecticides, that could be an interesting thing to explore. You just have to be careful about timing and really keeping an eye on populations. Kaolin clay can be great. So this is just clay mixed with water. It's a product you can buy. It's actually not an insecticide specifically. It just kind of gums up their antenna and disorients them. So this can be like a barrier or protectant spray that you can put on transplants or plants in your field that provides some level of protection. Some farmers use diatomaceous earth in a similar way. And of course, there are organic insecticides if you choose to go that route. And again, these are just options, so choose the things that make sense for you. Please don't attempt to do all of these. Don't think that's possible. So just, pick and choose the things that make sense for your situation. Okay, and for a really great farmer example for this pest comes from Susanna Ashkenas at Front Porch Farm. So she noticed cucumber beetles around the weeds and garlic under plastic mulch last month. And like many vegetable and flower growers in our region, cucumber beetle pressure was really high last year there too. So like I said, these pests are highly mobile. They fly around the landscape. So IPM strategies that Susanna is going to use this year that she told me about include scouting and documenting, such as with this photo that she sent me. It's a great example, just noticing what's going on out there, documenting it, removing overwintering habitat via weeding, monitoring populations with yellow sticky traps, possibly with pheromones. I think she might compare those and see which ones work better. Setting site appropriate thresholds, so thinking about what thresholds make sense for them and for different crops. And she mentioned they're going to try using kaolin clay on their transplants. So that's going to be on cucumbers, summer squash, and eggplants. I thought that was a really great idea because it's basically giving your transplants a little layer of protection. Like I said, it's just clay mixed with water. It's a specific product you can buy for this. And the transplants will outgrow it. So, within probably a month or two, you're going to start seeing new green leaves. So it's not something that's going to stick around for forever, which can be nice if you have to harvest your crop, like with lettuce or something. So again, this is a great example of how a farmer integrated multiple pest management strategies that you can see here in a way that's going to work well for their specific farm context. And again, I'm not saying everyone should go out and do this specific combination of strategies, but I do want to illustrate just one really awesome example of how our growers thinking through IPM at her farm and integrating several different strategies for effective pest control. Okay, so now we're going to move into creating your own IPM plan. So a lot of farmers I work with have expressed how much they'd really like to have dedicated time set aside to focus on this, and I totally get that. I know things get really busy. So we're going to use the last 30 minutes of this workshop right now to walk through how to write your own IPM plan for a pest of your choice. We're going to walk through a simple outline that you can find on my website, and I'll include a link to this later too. And you can use this however you want. This is your time. So you can do what you need to do, however works best for you to brainstorm and plan what you're going to do for IPM for a specific pest of your choice. So just take a minute and think about how you'd like to draft a new IPM plan or refine one that maybe you've already got. Maybe it's some notes you scribbled down somewhere. Maybe it's kind of like some ideas you have in your head, but think about how you want to plan in the next 20, 30 minutes. So maybe, you might want to get out a piece of paper and a pen. Maybe you want to start a note on your phone or computer. You could even get out your calendar and write down like when you want to do things specifically, however you like to brainstorm and plan. Okay, so with that, I think we're just going to take a quick break. So take a minute to reset, maybe stretch, grab a snack, and just get ready to plan. And I see there's some questions, notifications in the chat and the Q&A. So while folks get oriented and kind of switch gears, I'm going to see what's in the Q&A. Okay, and I see there's a question in the chat. I'm just going to answer it verbally here. So the question is, can you discuss the larval stage and strategy to address cucumber beetles from this angle? And that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I go into that in a lot more depth in that recording I sent you. It's an hour and 15 minutes. So I'm not going to have time to get into that right now because the focus of the next like half hour is more on everyone writing their own plan. But I will say there's nematode-based products that you apply to the soil as a soil drench, and that can really help as long as you make sure that you get your timing right and temperature right, and that kind of information is on your product label. but I go into a lot more depth in that presentation. So that's one option. You can, like I also mentioned, you could consider some light tillage to kill them in the soil. So a couple different strategies, but yeah, sorry, I don't have more time to go into that more. But the short answer is yes, there are definitely options for addressing the larval stage. Okay, another Q&A. Hi, I'm very, very new to farming, but excited. What are some resources, websites, books to help simplify? Yes, identifying pests. I'm so glad you asked. We are going to get to that in about like 5 minutes, probably less. So I'll give you some really great pest ID and just general insect ID resources in a couple minutes. And yeah, okay, another question. Are there resources for stopping large pests like ground squirrels? At my site right now, all we can do, uh, all we can do that has shown promise is to trap and fully cover crops. Yeah, so if you go to the UC IPM website and type in squirrels, a ton of resources will come up about different strategies you can use for squirrels. So I'd say go ahead and do that. I'm also going to show you what that website looks like in like a minute or so. And yeah, okay, another question I see in the chat. Can planting herbs like oregano here and there help discourage some bugs? I'm not sure about oregano, maybe. To be honest, I don't know off the top of my head if we have like research on that or like science-based information on that. It's totally possible. I'm not sure about oregano. I do know that other companion plants, there is really good research, like science-based research showing that certain companion plants can help discourage insect pests. Yeah, so it probably depends on which ones you select. Okay, so hopefully everyone has taken a quick break and you're ready to write an IPM plan. Oh, there's more. Yeah, yeah, no, just kidding. I answered all the questions I think for now, but please keep them coming. We've got plenty of time, so just throw them in the chat if you think of other stuff. Okay, so we're going to use this really nice visual in the following slides to keep track of where we're at in this process. So if you're ever wondering, like, okay, where are we at? You can look at the top right corner of the PowerPoint slides. So we're starting with ID. Okay, so number one is accurate pest identification. So before you do anything, it's really, really important to ensure the pest is correctly identified because everything you do will be tailored to that pest. Okay, so how do you do that? I'd highly recommend consulting science-based IPM resources and agricultural professionals. So the first place to start is, for me, is always the UC IPM website. So in this little search area here, you can type your pest problem, squirrels or cucumber beetles or symphylans or whatever, thrips, and then you can hit search. You can also go down here and decide, okay, I'm a backyard gardener, so I'm going to go to the home and landscape section, and then you can search there for answers specific to like the backyard context. Or for commercial growers, you can say, okay, I really just want to know about commercial ag. What are my solutions for my pest in the commercial ag setting? And then you can click on that icon. So that's kind of a nice way to start delineating and looking for answers. There are also a lot of other extension websites as needed. Like I mentioned, I used to work for Ohio State Extension. There are extension websites all over the country that have tons of great resources out there too. The nice thing about the UCIPM website is that it's specific to California. So it's going to have a lot of California-oriented information, which is great. Also, there are lots of UC Cooperative Extension advisors throughout the state. So in every county, you're going to have at least a couple advisors. So I'd recommend reaching out to your local counties. For commercial growers, you can also work with pest control advisors. So these are sometimes referred to as PCAs. And for non-commercial or backyard gardeners, the UC Master Gardeners can help you with pest identification as well. So lots of really great resources. So take just a minute and choose an insect pest you're going to focus on for the rest of this workshop, whichever pest you want. I know sometimes the biggest pests are like, squirrels or gophers or something. So if you want to branch out outside of insects, that's totally fine. Whatever makes sense for you. I'm going to keep focusing on bugs though. So you can type it in here. Another really nice place to go is called bugguide.net. So this is a website maintained by entomologists. So you know that this information here is coming from people who study bugs as their profession. And I really like this website because you can kind of scroll down. I can't do it here, but if you're on this website, bugguide.net, Here it is as well down here. You can scroll down and actually visually like look at different photos of bugs and say, okay, I think this is close to what I'm looking for. So that's kind of a nice way to do that too. I'm a visual person, so I really like that one. I also don't know that much about bugs because I'm a plant scientist by training, but I talk about IPM a lot for my job. So, choose an insect pest and then think about what you need to know about this pest. What do you already know about it? What do you need to know about it? What are your own knowledge gaps? And then you can explore these two websites to try to identify the pests and then think about, okay, what environmental conditions does it like? Does it like moisture? Does it like heat? What time of year is it going to come out? And start learning about biology. And so the UC IPM website has a ton of information about that biology. So descriptions of the pest is usually the first thing that comes up. Like, so let's say I clicked on agriculture, lettuce, symphylans. This is the page that comes up on the UC IPM website. And it tells me so much about this organism, what it looks like, what it likes, what it doesn't like, its mobility in the soil, its life cycle, and then it gets into management after that. So you want to learn about life cycle stages and timing, temperature, moisture, what it likes and doesn't like, its movement, and just generally what you can what you can expect behaviorally from this pest. So I'm just going to say we can take a minute and just read about your pest on the UC IPM website. So hopefully you have another tab open. Maybe I'm on your phone, you've got a desktop or laptop or something. So just take a minute and explore the UC IPM website for your specific pest that you chose. And while you do that, I'm going to check out the Q&A. Yeah, okay. So I got two different questions that are kind of asking a similar thing, which is like, how specific do I need to get when I'm identifying like aphids or the other one uh, in the chat, earwigs. Okay, stink bugs. Yeah. So how specific? It kind of depends. As specific as you can get is great. I'd highly recommend getting a hand lens if you're able. So it's just, oh, I usually have one sitting around here. So while you're looking up, I'm going to pull out a hand lens. So there are these little lenses that you kind of open up like that. And that lets you look at bugs a little bit closer, more magnification. So this is really nice to have around. They're like maybe 20, 30 bucks max. Um, and that can help you with identification. And on the UCIPM website, it'll walk you through like different types of aphids for a specific crop and say, okay, this one looks like that, and here are your management strategies. Whereas this other one, looks a little different, and here are the specific characteristics you should look for. And then here are your strategies for that. There might be some overlap, but I don't know like all about aphids specifically. So I would just say rely on this resource and see, what to do for which specific kind. There might be some overlap. I hope there is. But there might be some important differences that are worth noting as well. Okay, so step 2 is prevention strategies. So one of the first things you can do is just maintain good plant health. So weak plants, whether it's due to water stress, nutrient deficiencies, or so on, they're going to be more susceptible to pests. So as much as you can, making sure your plants have enough water, especially during the summertime, enough nutrients so that they have, they're able to function as fully as possible and be resilient in the face of stress. That's going to set your plants up for success. And then considering selection, maybe there's crops or varieties that are more tolerant or less susceptible than others. And if there are certain areas of your field that have specific insect problems, maybe thinking about rotation, that kind of thing. Another one is promoting unfavorable habitats. So can you modify the environment to make it less appealing to the pest in any way? Can you minimize the factors that really help it thrive? And that's where knowing its likes and dislikes really help. Maybe could you shift planting times to avoid population spikes? If you have good records and oh man, cucumber beetles really love it when the temperature hits a certain threshold, then you can use that information to think through when you time different things on your farm. So just take 1 minute to think through which of these prevention strategies you could explore a little bit more. Maybe you've kind of already done some of these, but maybe there's one or two that you could consider improving. So ways to prevent whatever insect pest that you've chosen. And there will be more information on these for your specific pests on the UC IPM website too. Okay, moving on to step 3. It's set an action threshold. So what does this mean? Basically, this just means deciding appropriate limits for pest presence and damage. So again, this is going to look different for different farms. Think about what makes sense for you. So how much damage is too much for your crops? What's the allowable crop injury level? It's going to be really context dependent. Maybe even different crops can sustain different amounts of damage on your farm. And think about what makes sense for your markets, right? So like fresh market versus processed, that kind of thing. Um, Thresholds can be numerical, so this is going to really help to assign a number to this. So maybe it's just as simple as average number of insect pests per trap, like, okay, 3 cucumber beetles or something like that. But what threshold makes sense for you? Maybe you'd rather just do percent damage in the field, well, about 5%, are damaged, so I'm going to take an action or something like that. So think about what kind of numerical threshold makes sense for you and your specific pests on your farm. And then from there, you're going to create action-oriented guidelines for your farm based on your threshold. So just take a minute and write down an action threshold for your pest, and then what you're going to do about it. So if and when that threshold is reached, what are you going to do? And just bear in mind, you can experiment and reevaluate this over time. Again, it's cycle, every year is a little bit different. But just for now, start with one threshold and a couple actions. Okay, and then step 4, we have scouting, monitoring, and record keeping. So this just means systematically assessing pest populations and damage. I'd highly recommend creating a routine monitoring plan to check your field on a regular basis. So maybe that means checking sticky traps twice per week. Maybe it's more than that if you can, especially if it's a smaller farm. Maybe less walking or less moving around. But just as an example, check your traps twice a week, something like that. The UC IPM website will have information about that too, like how often you might want to scout for that. Scouting just means actively searching for early signs of the pests. Monitoring just means continuously tracking pest populations over time. And for record keeping, you might want to write down where and when the pest is found, how many are present, and the degree of crop damage. So I just recommend create a record keeping system that works well for you so you can track changes over time. That's going to help you refine your IPM plan. This can look like a lot of different things. Maybe it's just a notepad, maybe it's a note on your phone or something else. It can be really helpful to have established protocols and a designated person for this, if possible, just for consistency. Sometimes different people might scout in different ways or might, consider some level of damage, a lot of damage, or other people think, oh, it's not that much. So that's where having numbers really helps and consistency can help a lot. So just think about what's going to work best for you, who's going to do this and how often. So just take a minute to brainstorm. how are you going to go about scouting, monitoring, and keeping track of what's going on? Okay, and moving on to step 5, exploring management strategies. So this is the fun one, in my opinion. This is where you can plan to use a combination of management strategies. So you're going to explore lots of different options and choose some of them, the ones that make sense for you. So you'd want to consult science-based IPM resources, UC Cooperative Extension advisors, and agricultural professionals. I highly recommend starting with that UC IPM website and just moving up this triangle. So what strategies do you want in your toolbox for this pest? So breaking this down a little bit more, I wanted to explain, cultural control. This just means practices that reduce pest establishment, reproduction, dispersal, or survival. Mechanical control is pretty similar. There's a lot of overlap, but it basically just means practices that kill a pest directly, exclude it, or make the environment unfavorable for it. Biological control, this might mean, natural enemies like predators, pathogens, or competitors. Some of those are things you can encourage, naturally, like through hedgerows. Sometimes you might find products that actually use living organisms that specifically attack the insect pest that you're interested in controlling. So there are those options out there, and there's also organic chemical control options too. So certifier approved products made from non-synthetic active ingredients. So just breaking down these terms, that's what we're talking about. So just take a minute and think through which strategies are going to work for you. Maybe you've tried some of these already and you think, man, maybe I could try, exclusion in a different way. Maybe there's a different kind of floating row cover I want to try out, or, a different way that you could use these strategies this year. So take a second and explore those resources I shared online and just see maybe there's something you haven't tried yet. I'm going to give you guys one more minute for this one because there's a lot here. Okay, can always keep working on this. So the last step I want to cover briefly is evaluation. This one's super important. So you just want to assess the effects of your strategies. How did it go? Was the pest controlled enough? What worked? What didn't? Why do you think it worked or didn't work? What could you do differently next time? And really important, what resources or information do you need for next year or for the future? What gaps do you still have? So your thresholds and strategies can be continually reevaluated and adjusted considering your records and observations. of course, climate change and how one year is going to be really different from the next year. So just remember this is a process, it's not prescriptive, it's ongoing. Every year is going to be a little bit different. But the more you can try things out, evaluate, and keep track of what you did and how it went, then you can use that information each year. And each year you'll have a little bit more info and it'll hopefully get a little bit easier. So I just want to summarize your IPM resources that I mentioned. There's probably lots more out there, but these are just some highlights I wanted to make sure you have on your radar. So I mentioned the UC IPM website a lot. Definitely reach out to your local county UC Cooperative Extension office and ask us questions. You could consider working with pest control advisors for if you're a commercial grower. You could check out CAF's awesome ecological pest management work, super cool. Resource conservation districts or RCDs are great, so you might want to check in with them for funding opportunities for conservation practices such as hedgerows, stuff like that. The UC Master Gardeners are an awesome resource for backyard or non-commercial gardeners. Highly, highly recommend reaching out to them for those types of questions. And, I love that this is something that the CAF Small Farm Conference really promotes, and I'm here to promote it too. So would highly, highly recommend reaching out to other farmers and gardeners who are open to sharing their experiences and observations. I try to incorporate a lot of real world examples shared with permission from farmers in my presentations and in my educational outreach, because I think it's so, so helpful to hear from other farmers. What are you seeing out there? How's it going? What have you tried? What works? What doesn't? So definitely don't be shy. Go to events, reach out to each other, and ask each other questions. See how things are going. Because if you're struggling with a pest, chances are a lot of other farmers probably are too. So please bear in mind you have a lot of resources, including each other. And I've also recorded a bunch of content on the pests that I mentioned, cucumber beetles and symphylans. There's also this really great insect ID for specialty crop growers. This is a 2.5 hour training specifically on insect identification, including beneficials. So this isn't just pests. For this presentation, it's all insects. So this was Cindy Cron, our area IPM advisor in the North Coast area. She did a really awesome training and I recorded it and put it on my YouTube channel too. So please check this out as well if you just want like a really big foundational introduction to how to ID bugs. Okay, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I know we have time for a Q&A and I can see there's some in the chat. I hope this gave you a good foundation for IPM and kind of opened up the doors to a lot of these different really awesome resources that you can use to help identify and manage pests effectively this year. So please never hesitate to reach out to me directly. I'm going to put my email in the chat here. And yeah, we have plenty of time for Q&A. So I think I might just stay on this page so that you can keep going through this cycle. If you want to hang out, ask questions, think out loud, it would be really great if one or two people wouldn't mind sharing what you wrote about. So which pest did you choose? What strategies are you thinking about? Evan, is it okay if people unmute themselves? Is that possible? Or maybe just type it in the chat?
Yeah, I think we want to stick with the chat.
Okay,
Probably
sounds
easier
good.
for the
Yeah, great.
Q&A.
So yes, please, anyone who's willing to share, please feel free and just type in the chat who your insect pest is, your number one insect pest that you want to work on this year, who you wrote about, who you're brainstorming and planning about, and what strategies you're considering, and if you have any questions. And I could even go through the UC IPM website for a pest of your choice because we have time. And it looks like there aren't too many questions that I haven't got already. Okay. Deers. Oh, yeah, deer. That's a big one. Do your videos offer, now, unfortunately, that's a great question. So someone asked me, do your videos offer continuing education units for DPR? Not at the moment, but in the future, I can definitely do that. This is the first request I've gotten for that. But that is something that we can do through UC Cooperative Extension. And a lot of IPM advisors do offer that, like Cindy Cron in our region. She's just specific to the North Coast, but a lot of times we're able to do that. So yeah, if there's interest, I can definitely do that. Great question. All right, I see some awesome examples in the chat. Flea beetles, thinking of using nematodes unless you have other thoughts. I would recommend checking out the UC IPM website. I don't know off the top of my head. If you're going to use nematode-based products, I highly recommend reading the label really carefully and following the directions, and also calling whoever you're buying it from and asking them about temperature. So, what temperature is this product most effective at? Because nematodes need certain soil temperatures in order to thrive. They also need specific moisture conditions. So I've in the past, again, this is not my area of expertise, but I've talked to people um, who sell these products and specialize in this and say, like, okay, you really need to make sure you irrigate before you apply nematode-based products because they need that moisture in the soil to move around. So if you can, whoever you're thinking about purchasing products from, call them and say, just ask them lots of questions about the best way to use their product, and don't be shy to kind of like pick their brain because every product's going to be a little bit different. Okay, yeah, gophers, everyone. I think every farm 99% of farms must have gophers. There's a really great, oh, actually, I'll just take a second and pull up a gopher resource. Give me 1 second, because this one is a big one. It comes up a lot. Okay, so if you go to my website, which is UC Cooperative Extension, Sonoma County, that's me. You scroll down. This is just general information about my program. But if you go to this left-hand side and click on Integrated Pest Management, this is just one of many, many things I focus on in my job. My background is really more in like plant and soil science, but IPM is a huge, huge need in my area. So I've compiled a lot of resources specifically for IPM for crops in my area. So I have a big list of IPM resources for apples, olives, vegetable crops, and so on. But I want to make sure everyone knows we have a lot of great gopher resources on the UC IPM website. For one, you can just go to this page, which walks you through pretty much everything you need to know about gophers. There's a lot of info here about how to manage gophers. I also have this resource, which is a really nice overview of burrowing rodents. So as you can see, this just kind of goes on and on. I'm not going to click through all of them, but I'm going to put this link in the chat for anyone who has gopher questions because they're really, really tricky, but there are a bunch of strategies you can use. I also have really awesome anecdotes from farmers. Here it's Peter Martinelli, who's just a pro at gophers. So I've tried to integrate in, a lot of IPM resources, but also some anecdotal stuff too. And I also did a 2-hour webinar on gopher control. That's also on my YouTube channel. So might be more info than you need, but I'm going to put it all in the chat. So there's my website. And then, stop share. You see there's a lot going on in the chat. That's awesome. Give me 1 second. I will put my YouTube channel in the chat as well. So this is where you can find that webinar recording on gophers. That was with Roger Baldwin, Brianna Martinico, who are both with UC Cooperative Extension, and also with a panel of, I think, 5 or 6 different local farmers who are really great at gopher management. So you get to hear from other farmers there too. Okay, so I'm gonna go back through the chat. Thanks for bearing with me. Give me 1 second. Okay. We're gonna try blue Hubbard trap cropping for cucumber beetles. Yes, okay, that's great. I'm hoping someone would try that. So I was reading about that because they really do prefer Hubbard squash, it sounds like. So I think that's great. I highly recommend thinking about what you're gonna do when you do have a lot of cucumber beetles on your squash though. So, and that's where I'm thinking maybe if it's a small area, maybe a insect vacuum might work. And so you can actually buy leaf blowers that have a reverse function and then like put a bag on the end or like a nylon thing. Like there's a link to this as well. It's all in my cucumber beetle presentation on my YouTube channel, but basically there's like, you can buy leaf blowers and just use a reverse function. So that could be a way to deal with a bunch of cucumber beetles that congregate around your Hubbard squash. You can also use insecticides. I know most people try to not do that though, so that's where maybe an insect vacuum might make sense on a small area. Um, so I would just say, yeah, be ready to deal with a lot of beetles if you go that route. I hope it works. I think it's trap cropping is probably pretty underutilized. I have a whole section on that with an example from Do Right Flower Farm, shared by Kelly Brown with permission there as well, where they go through their trap crop with sunflowers for cucumber beetles and a lot more detail. So yeah, I think trap cropping is really interesting. You just want to make sure you know what you're going to do uh, once it works. Okay, we grow, let's see. Yeah, cucumber beetles are a major problem in, gardens, commercial farms. They're just so mobile. They fly around really readily. Aphids, developing systematic monitoring. Yay! Love the sound of that, considering planting arrangements, buffer aphid attracting crops from each other. Awesome. That sounds great. Love it. Happy to hear people's thoughts. Yes, more thoughts, experiments, ideas for slugs. Yeah, definitely. If you have slug tips, please throw them in there. I will also put the slugs link from UC IPM in the chat too. Okay, let's see. Have you heard of any successful results using bird scare cannons or specifically for turkeys or other control ideas besides row cover? That's a great question. I don't know anything about turkeys off the top of my head. I don't know, but I'm going to look online really quick. I feel like maybe the UC IPM website has something on turkeys. It probably does. Let me see. Yep, it sure does. Okay, I'm going to share my screen so you can see this. Great question. I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Okay, so I just put UCIPM turkeys, and this is what came up. So this is in home and landscape, so you might want to look at the agriculture section too, but this at the very least will give you some information about biology behavior. Maybe you're already well too acquainted with that, but it's going to go through different strategies. I wonder about noise cannons though. I'm just going to search. Look at that. Okay, so I did command search for noise. And this says, noise-making devices such as radios and noise cannons have also been shown to discourage turkeys, but these can also annoy neighbors. So if you use noise-making devices, make sure it is legal within your municipality and be considerate of neighbors. Okay, so it sounds like, yes, they can work, just be thoughtful about it. Make sure you do this in a legal and considerate way. But yeah, so I would just recommend everyone, just type in Google UCIPM problem, it'll come up, or just go to this homepage. You can type in this little search bar. I've searched for symphylans more than once here. Okay, I hope that helps. Great question. Leaf-footed bugs. Yeah, yesterday we heard about some raptors that like gophers. That's great. Yeah, definitely check out my YouTube channel for that really long webinar on gophers. Gopher hawk traps, yep, they can be really effective. I hear a lot of farmers in my region love gopher hawk traps for a lot of reasons. They have this like little thing that shows when it's gone down, so you can kind of see it from far away. I know people like that. They're easy to install. This is all just anecdotal from farmers. So yeah, that's a great option. I've heard a lot of good things. I don't know what gopher weed is, so couldn't say. Oh yes, Layla, thank you. Great. Yes, at the North Bay Gathering this Thursday, there will be an in-person trapping workshop. Going to be awesome. I will definitely be there. Anyone in our region who deals with gophers, please go to that workshop. It's going to be great. Okay, I've seen gopher activity right next to gopher weed plants. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is to be honest. Okay, Amanda says my backup napkin plan for aphids. Love it. I love bullet point outlines. This is great. Amanda says she's going to go by hand lens. Yes, that's great. Check twice weekly and record findings. Love it. Low threshold. Yes, I highly recommend relatively low thresholds in general because a lot of farms I work with are organic. We don't have the same control options as conventional growers. Low conservative thresholds are great. Maybe 5 different plants with damage that deem plants unmarketable. Can't sell flowers with lots of holes. Yeah, great. That's really good. Preventative, prune leaves from fruit trees and other plants. Mesh covers. Management, spray sturdy veggies with water. Kale can take it. Use neem oil if needed. Yep, that looks great. Okay. Rachel says, I handpick snails at dusk and dawn, but slugs love leaf mulch and straw, so I shake it up and clear the ground around plants. Also tried beer dishes without huge success. Yeah, so slugs and snails, big problem. They do love organic matter. They love mulch. They love straw. All of that's totally true. So if we go to here and type in, oops, that didn't work. Let me try that one more time. If we go type in slugs. So this is a pest note on slugs. This is in gardens and landscapes. A lot of this is going to be really similar in commercial systems, but if you did want commercial systems, then you could go to that other section. So this is where you go to find all kinds of information out about snails and slugs and integrated pest management strategies. So I'm just going to throw this in the chat too. Cinch is better. Yeah, some people like cinch traps. It totally depends. Thanks, Cameron. Yeah, I would say try them both, you know? Like I said, you know, everything's going to be different. Different farmers like different things, different situations. Maybe try both, see which one you like more. Maybe use some over here, some over there, that kind of thing, and just compare and see what works for you. What's your YouTube channel called? It's called UCCE North Bay Specialty Crops, and I put a link in the chat, but I'll just do it again real quick. So my YouTube channel, a couple growers recommended I do this. They were like, hey, we want to come to your webinars, but we're not able to be there the day of, so could you record it? So that's kind of how this started. This is mostly recordings of webinars, but I also have some demonstrations from farmers and other ag professionals, you know, showing how to do the potato bait test for symphylans and stuff like that. Oh, you're not seeing my post in the chat. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Now I see, I think I was just posting to hosts and panelists. Wow, thank you so much, Trish. Okay, let's try that again. So there, can you all see that? Hopefully. Okay, great. Well, I know Evan told me that there's this tool that I can use in Sched to go back and like send you all links. So I'm just gonna like put a list together and send all of these links to you guys there. Yeah, sorry. Now I'm seeing that in the chat. You guys were trying to tell me that, but I was a little higher up. So sorry I didn't catch that sooner. Okay, so let's see. Cameron says, in Aptos, we extensively tested different. Oh, cool. We tested different gopher traps. Cinch is our favorite. I used to farm there in 2021. Now, as a TA provider, I use cinch traps to demo growers usually taste. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so yeah, he really likes cinch traps. A lot of farmers like that a lot. I have some good anecdotes from Peter Martinelli on my webpage too about that and like different trap sizes. And like if you have really big gophers, you might need bigger cinch traps, that kind of thing. Yeah, okay, I see. I think yeah, I can share in the chat now. It looks like people are getting that. I'm gonna go back and put some more links in the chat since we have time. Oh, we have 5 minutes. Any other questions while I round up those links? Thank you so much, everyone who shared stuff about what you want to do, what pests you're dealing with. Okay. Question about what do you recommend in regards to dealing with the same pest for 2 or more years? Sorry if you have already covered this. It's a great question. I mean, I think an important point here is that like IPM is not going to eradicate anything. We're not going for 100% complete control because it's not, just not possible. So you are going to probably see the same pest come up year after year. I would highly recommend taking lots of notes about when the pest emerges, like when you start seeing it, maybe in the spring, year to year, if there's like certain temperatures or certain like thresholds, once this time hits or once certain, is 70 degrees or something starts, that's where we're starting. And the UC IPM website will have that information for you too. So like some insect pests are really specific about when they start. So I'd recommend definitely knowing like what conditions it's going to start proliferating at and come out more at. And then just your own notes too, because like every farm's different and we have microclimates everywhere, of course. So like for your specific farm, when do you start seeing this being a problem? And then lots of notes about what did I try, what worked, what didn't, why do I think it worked, maybe why didn't it work? And then ultimately just reaching out to us, to UC Cooperative Extension Advisors, the CAF and other folks, and say, okay, here's what I've tried, here's what I think's working, and then here's what I really need help with. Maybe like I've got row cover and I'm gonna try this other thing, but I really want to know about the specific strategy or how to fine tune things in a certain way. So, yeah, I would say, really good record keeping, understanding the biology, and then just reaching out for support and comparing notes with other farmers too. A lot of what I hear, from farmers is about like, well, I really like this specific kind of netting because, it has these benefits or whatever. So I do hear a lot of anecdotes too, and I can kind of share out some of that as well. So, yeah, I would say don't give up and know that, we're never going to get rid of all of them entirely, but you do have a lot of resources and just reach out if you want help fine tuning things or trying new strategies. Okay, let's see. Last comment. I think we have just a couple minutes. I had marigold plant eaten by gophers. Yeah, marigolds are one of the supposed. Yeah, 100-foot row. I only lost one plant. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, I'm glad it wasn't terrible. It sounds like. Um, yeah, gophers will eat a lot of different crops. Unfortunately, they'll go for all kinds of different things. So, but it sounds like it wasn't too much of a problem. I'm going to see if there's a Q&A. Okay, no more Q&A. I think I've answered most of the questions. Oh, and I'm going to put my email in the chat. So please feel free to email me if you have questions. Again, like I'm not, an entomologist or an expert in this area necessarily, but I can definitely connect you with resources and just tell you, what I've heard anecdotally from farmers and also connect you with UCIPM resources too and other advisors in your area because every region's different.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ellie, for this wonderful presentation. And thanks for everybody for coming out and learning about IPM. And we will be following up with more details and resources via email. So keep an eye on that and check out Ellie's YouTube channel full of wonderful videos and webinars. And we hope to see you all at the next workshop here at the California Small Farm Conference.
Thank you so much.